Hello, welcome to Tuesday's Hotline Live with Record Sport. My name is Daniel Caw. As ever, I am over the moon to be joined by the one and only Keith Jackson. Keith.
Hi.
And tonight we are honoured to be joined by the one and only Andy Newport. Andy, how's it going?
I'm wondering why we're here. It's still the height of close season. Surely my lot summer break. I mean, we complain about all these footballers complain about being overplayed and overuse. I mean, surely we should still be another couple of weeks holiday from this.
You're not going to burn out, are you, Andy?
I feel like that. It's been a long, weary season. I'm still not really fully recharged yet. I've got another couple of weeks to go before I'm back to my best.
We better try and lift the energy levels here, guys, because this might get less of an audience in the World Cup. I was
going to say, there's plenty to talk about. Come on, let's get into this.
Listen, let me start. I'll tell you what I want to talk about.
Go on.
You know the reason I'm sitting here doing this remotely? You know how I like to at least have this veneer, this sort of a pretense of professionalism. That's why I like to go into the office, show people we've got a studio, we're a real thing. Well, today, as you know, Daniel, within the last couple of hours, and I have to send out my heartfelt congratulations to the good people of Glasgow City Council, because after years of attempting to do so, and coming pretty close often over the period, they finally rendered the city centre completely unusable for the good people of Glasgow and the people who like to work or have got office space in the city centre. The place is an absolute chasm, a shambles. And it took me, I had to abandon coming into the office. I've never seen it as bad, by the way. I think they're hiring out half of the city centre film that's getting produced, which is great when people are trying to get to their work. And it took me, an hour and a half to go 8 miles into town and 8 miles back out the town. So, Glasgow, you've surpassed yourself. You've finally done it. Well done. Well done. Job achieved. You've absolutely wrecked the gaff.
We should rename this.
Off my plate, Dan. Let's get on with the football.
We should rename this the Grumpy. Oh, there you go. Marzuno's just said, "Is this the Grumpy Old Men podcast?" Rangers, is he okay?
Some of us are older and grumpier than others. I'm not just want to make that.
Rangers, is he okay? Saying, take it, Spider-Man. Keith, I was saying I thought it was Spider-Man, but I do think there's J.J. Abrahams. I don't even know what it is he's filming, but they like to.
Relation of mine, Samuel L. He's in there doing his bit. I think.
Well, let's start on Rangers then. Let's get into football, guys. Let's get into the spirit. Come on. Rangers, Keith, you wrote a piece for Record Sport Online today talking about Rangers transfer, rinse and repeat. Yeah. Tell me more.
Well, and it's so unfortunate for the new regime who are coming in, obviously the Americans, Andrew Kavanagh and his guys. And they're exactly what Rangers needed. I think, this time last season, round about then, Daniel, I started saying that the only thing that was ever going to fix Rangers, that was going to make them competitive again, would be regime change. From top to bottom, it needed a recalibration, it needed fresh investment, it needed fresh thinking, it needed modernised, it needed taken away from the sort of bowling club committee structure that was in charge. And these guys have offered that. And that's great. And I think long-term, Rangers will really benefit from it. Do you know where they're really unlucky? And I think to an extent, Russell Martin as well. They're coming into this, they're fresh, they're new, but they're facing the same old problems that Rangers seem to give themselves every summer. Now, none of that is they're doing, apart from the fact you could argue that Rangers, Kavanagh could have got the takeover completed on schedule, which would at least have given a little bit more preparation time. But I feel sorry for the Rangers fans, because I think their excitement about this whole thing has been diluted a little bit by the fact that here they are again, facing the exact same set of circumstances that they seem to face, if not every summer, then every couple of summers, where it's a new manager needing to route a squad which has been underachieving, not delivering, players that they no longer have trust in, guys on big contracts who don't want to move. These same issues are affecting, and it's nothing to do with Russell Martin, and it's nothing to do with Americans, but yet it's where Rangers are, rinse and repeat. You can trace it back 10 years to Mark Warburton coming in. And then you've had others, Pedro Caixinha, Steven Gerrard had a few goes over the summer windows, varying success. Giovanni van Bronckhorst in Clermont, Michael Beale was thrown in there as well with disastrous consequences. And I wonder, I think when Rangers fans, I'm sure that they'll have loads of goodwill for the new regime and to probably a lesser extent to Russell Martin, but they're going to have to try from somewhere and summon up a bit of patience and give them a bit of time because we mentioned last night Rangers did go into this rebuild late, way behind the 8 ball because of the takeover, running behind schedule, and they've got so much work to do. And I think, and I feel sorry for the Rangers fans because I think they were just wanting a fresh start, but it feels like they've been in this movie so many times. And I think that they would look at it realistically and reach the conclusion, this is going to be pretty hard to pull all this off, all the work that's required with the squad, and try and get it into a state where, one, it's ready for Champions League qualification in a month's time, and two, it's ready to throw the gauntlet down to Celtic for the start of the domestic campaign, because it looks really difficult from where they're at right now. And again, some of the names that have come up, the players that Rangers are being linked with, that we think there's some substance in more than one of them anyway, in terms of players that have made a name for themselves in the kind of lower echelons of English football and the second tier, third tier. And there might be Rangers fans out there that sends a wee shiver down the spine, because it will remind them of Mark Warburton's sort of strategy 10 years ago, when Rangers weren't even in the Premier League or in the Premiership. So, and that again is completely unfair on Russell Martin, because it's none of his doing. Mm-hmm. But you can just feel that I think they're up against it in terms of bringing the fans with them, and the fans, I'm sure, want to be buying into this whole thing, but it just feels a little bit at this moment in time as if it's going to be a very similar summer to some of the ones that they've been through in previous years. As I said, no doubt in the longer term, Rangers will get into their stride, but there's so many sort of legacy issues that they're going to have to clear up first. And that makes it a difficult one, especially for Russell Martin. The Americans are here for the long haul, you would imagine. Russell Martin, however, is going to have to try and convince people from day one in the new season that he is indeed the right man for the job, because there was a lot of doubt and a lot of criticism of his appointment. But he's going to have to battle these legacy issues as well right from the start. So it's a tough spot. But do you know something? I give Russell Martin a lot of credit for the fact that he's gone into this with his eyes open. He will have known that they were kind of a little bit behind where they ought to be in terms of building the squad that he'll want to have in place for next season. But he was brave enough, he had the courage to take it on. And it might have been easier for a young guy, 39, well-regarded down in England, even despite what happened to Southampton. There was an easier life waiting for him at Leicester City, and he chose not to take it. In fact, he resisted Leicester City, held them off, hoping to get this opportunity. He's got it. But, wow, it's a big summer in front of him, isn't it? It's a big few weeks, and that's all it is, just a few weeks. I say a big summer, it's literally 4 weeks before people are getting their boots back on.
Aye. In the comment section, and actually, if you want to get involved, hit us with your comments, please do. If you want to get involved in the conversation, Scott is staying positive. He says no signings yet, but we don't know what's happening in the background. John asks if the Americans have spent a cent yet, apart from the takeover. Rangers, is he okay? Agrees with you though, Keith, in terms of the English market. He says, going to take a chance in a few, going to have a mixture of loans, frees and spending. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong comment. That's what he says after. Sorry. He says, bit concerned we seem to use the English market quite heavily again, because for every Bassey and Aribo you can find, you get a Davies, Lawrence or Cantwell. But we need so many players that we are going to take a chance in a few, have a mixture of loans, free and spending.
I think that's right. It'll need to be a mixture, because it can't just be scrubbing around in the bargain buckets. There need to be something a little bit more imaginative and exciting for the supporters to really engage them fully for the start of the season, I would have thought, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just interesting what you're saying there. Obviously, reflecting back on like Mark Warburton's time, I actually spoke to him for a piece that's going in tomorrow's paper. You can read it online just now, and he sort of spoke about look back in his time. Obviously, pre-season training starts on Monday for Russell Martin, and he was talking about his first day at the club and only had 9 players turn up his first day. He had to go and borrow Barry Mackay out the reserves to make up a 5-a-side game, and that was what sort of gave him his big chance. But for him, it was important because he could use it as a blank canvas. He could go out and get the guys that he felt were going to be good enough. He had enough slots in his squad to make the changes he felt were necessary at that time. Russell Martin's is going to be limited in what he can do until he gets these guys off the, your Jose Cifuentes, Rabi Matondos, Kieran Dowles, Ben Davies, until he can get these guys off, and you can be sure they're all earning a pretty penny or two. They've come up here, especially your Matondos, your Ben Davies. They've come up here on big contracts, and so that will be limiting what Russell Martin can do. So until those guys get moved on, and if it's possible to move on, they might have to pay them off, as was the case last summer when those 5 players basically left for not much, 800 grand. They got a lot more than that, Rangers, but they had to then turn around and hand most of it back to just to get these guys on big contracts off the wage bill. So I think that, I can understand there's a wee bit of frustration creeping into the support, just on the basis that there's been wee things over the last few months that have just given them that sense of hope, that sense of optimism in what has been a very bleak time. It comes in spurts. They've not been followed up. You get the news of the takeover the last months, 3-4 months before Keith's story came to fruition. Obviously the takeover goes through. You get Kevin Fairwell starting. You get Russell Martin getting appointed, and at that point the fans are like, right, great. It's all hands on deck. Let's get the signings in, and again it just kind of goes a wee bit quiet again. And that enthusiasm, that excitement that they might have for the new season just sort of dissipates a wee bit. So I can imagine the encouragement, the sense of excitement will build when they get a few bodies in. But until that happens, you're going to get these lulls in mood, I suppose, within the supporters. But the time is marching on, as I say. Russell Martin's going to be meeting these players for the first time come Monday. I think he'd like to have a couple in just to be starting, because there's a pretty big change in style, change of philosophy that's going to be implemented. The more time he can get with these new players on the training pitch, the better. It's going to be crucial. As Keith says, the Champions League qualifier is going to be on the 22nd of July. We're now, the 17th of June? So, there is not a decade to be wasted in the training pitch. So, I think for all concerned, I think it would just be, it would certainly calm everyone down if Rangers could just get a couple of bodies in, certainly before Monday, if not soon.
I think, Andy, in terms of Russell Martin's position, I think there's an onus on the board, the new board, they have to do everything that they possibly can in order to help him, because they have to understand, if they don't already, then somebody should have been telling them that Russell Martin is the guy that ultimately will have to front all this up. He's the guy that a big section of Rangers supporters weren't keen on his appointment in the first place. And he's the guy that's almost got two hands tied behind his back at this stage. I've written today, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, Andy, but it almost feels already at this point, in order for him to achieve the sort of success I think he'll need to achieve next season to get another go at this in 12 months' time, somewhere between a magician and a miracle worker is required. Because I think that's how difficult this situation is for him.
Yeah, I did say last time, a couple of weeks ago when I was on, that I felt, rightly or wrongly, no, that's acceptable or not, this new board are going to have to show some resilience in the next 12 months of things. I still think it's a major ask for Rangers to be winning league titles next year. I think that's, especially where they are now, from a standing start.
They need to be competitive, Andy.
Yeah, the competitive is one thing, but to be winning titles, I think the Rangers fans will give them a period of grace as long as there is, as you say, signs of development, signs of progress. But the thing is that this Rangers board have to get out of the cycle, that rinse and repeat that you're talking about. The previous board felt, guilty of doing time and time again, because by just doing these knee-jerk reactions, anytime there's 2 or 3 bad results, a manager's under pressure. That's how you get into this cycle of one bad signing being, followed by another. They need to get out of this. They need to have a period of steady progress, steady building. The Rangers squad right now is the culmination of 4 or 5 managers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's not a sense of style to it. There's not a sense of a uniform nature of it. It's a patchwork, lineup effectively. So they need to get out of that. I think we discussed this last time we were on the change in title that Russell Martin's got. He's the head coach. He's not the manager. They've made it pretty clear that he's going to have a role to play in recruitment, but that is not going to be his. He's not going to have the major say, so he's going to have a voice in it, but he's just going to be a voice amongst the discussion. I think what they're trying to do is take as much of the outside noise, outside responsibility, and just allow him to coach the players that he has. But I just think that also allows him that when fingers do get pointed, if a signing comes in and doesn't hit the ground, he can rightly sit and go, well, I was only a part of the discussion. It wasn't done in my ultimate say-so. So I think that is it could be a wise thing in his part, but I think we've seen him before when he was at Swansea. I think he had frustrations over the way that recruitment was done there, and he ended up I think there was an infamous sort of press conference he held where he came in flanked by his assistants, where they sort of had a pot back at the people above him and sort of tried to redirect the sort of blame in their way. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes out. But I think what the new regime are doing is try to take as much of the pressure and the expectation levels off his shoulders and just allow him to go and coach the team.
I like that. I'm all for modernisation, but I do feel, and I think that Rangers have been particularly guilty of this over the last period, Andy, the lack of accountability. People are looking at players saying, who signed him? Everybody shrugs their shoulders if it's a good one, and everybody puts their hands up. Everybody shrugs their shoulders if it's a bad one, and everybody puts their hands up when it's a good one. And wants to, I think accountability is no bad thing. I do understand the way the game's changing. I'm not sure, I think if you were a manager or a head coach going into that position, you'd want to be, have a real heavy say in, the guys that you're being given to work with. Interesting. Obviously, the profiles of some of the guys that we've been looking at already, thinking of Max Aaron in particular, looks like a guy that obviously Russell Martin will have a good knowledge of from down south. But that's taken an interesting twist today, hasn't it? That the suggestion being from down south that Bournemouth would far rather, and for obvious reasons, prefer a permanent sale rather than another loan deal for him. And we discussed last night, Andy, Leeds United have been quoted with an interest in him and a potential bid for £7 million. And that's really interesting as well, if it's a shared database that they're using, looking at players that fit the sort of style of football that obviously the 49ers want to see implemented. Obviously, they must believe that this boy fits into it because he's now been linked with the 2 clubs. And you wonder in this sort of situation, because Leeds have got a great deal more to spend than Rangers. £7 million, is that too much for a Rangers signing this summer?
I can't see Rangers spending £7 million on a right back. I mean, as crucial as James Tavernier's been to the team, he's captain. I still imagine, he's had a difficult season, but I still expect him to be starting the season. So you're saying they're going to spend £7 million on a guy that, at this moment in time, probably guaranteed to be playing every week. I'm not sure that that's where the money needs to be spent. I think there's more pressing areas of the team. Certainly, maybe up front, certainly midfield. Definitely, they also need probably 2 centre backs, another goalkeeper. I mean, Rangers need strengthened 1 to 11 basically. So, are they really going to go and spend what we believe, a third of this £20 million that the 49ers are going to put in, and they're going to spend that on a right back? I'm just not sure. in terms of, Bournemouth saying, no, we want a permanent deal over a loan, of course they do. They want the money now. Max Aarons, he's obviously had a handful of appearances for Bournemouth. I watched one of the sort of YouTube compilation clips today. Looks great. They're always doing these clips, these things that you see put up. They always show you the highlights rather than the lowlights. I was going to
say, we look good on YouTube, but then I'm not so
sure. Yeah, I mean, he looks a decent player. Looks very similar to James Tavernier in terms of that sort of pacey right back that sort of likes to dribble the ball and drive into space. But I think Bournemouth, I think he went to Valencia last year, didn't have the greatest of times, only played, again, a handful of games over there. So, yeah, they'll basically want the money so they can move him on, not have to worry about him sort of clogging up their squad. Does a loan really suit them? Especially, you don't imagine Rangers will be covering all of his wages, Premier League wages down there. So, I'm not so sure, unless somebody comes in with a bid, I'm not sure that's something Rangers need to be worried about if they believe that they can get him on loan and the player wants to come and there's not much competition elsewhere. He'll come here on loan. If that's the only offer on the table for Bournemouth, that'll be the one that they take.
Just playing devil's advocate here, what do you think the reaction would be, guys, if Leeds bought him for £7 million and then loaned him to Rangers?
It's an interesting prospect.
Yeah.
I can imagine there's a few folk would have something to say, perhaps across the other side of the city.
Before we move on from Rangers, Carter very kindly says the wee ginger kid from Dundee signed, which I think he's mentioning Lyle Cameron. Obviously joined from Dundee. Had a really good season last year with Dundee. Do you hold much hope for him being a really mainstay in Russell Martin's side, Andy?
I think there's certainly a lot of potential there with him. I think you look at his numbers last year, what was it, 14 goals, 9 assists. I mean, I think they're decent for a team, especially for a team that were struggling like Dundee were last year. I think if you look back the season before last, when he was there with Luke McCowan, and the two of them were the real sort of focal point of that Dundee side under Tony Docherty when he got to the top 6. And you look at the impact that Luke McCown's had at Celtic. I think he's had a terrific first year there. Okay, maybe not started as many games as he would like, but I think he's certainly proven himself to be a capable squad member. I fully expect Lyle Cameron to do the same. Is he going to start every week? Hard to know at this point. It's hard to see, really wait and see what the sort of additions Rangers make. But I think, judging the guys that have gone out, is he a better option than a Tom Lawrence or a Yanis Hadji who are never really fit? I think he could go in there and make that Rangers team, as it finished last season, I think he can make an impact in that team. So, but as I say, it all comes down to who else comes in the door, how much game time he gets this year.
I think it's important as well, Daniel, that Rangers do have a Scottish influence in the dressing room. Now, I know that he's a young boy, but the more Scottish guys they can get around, and not just for sentimental or kind of parochial reasons, but for in terms of your UEFA squads and all that, you need to have a sort of a decent homegrown element. So I think that helps in that regard. Andy, I wanted to ask you a question. Bit of stuff swirling around this afternoon linking Aston Villa with Nico Raskin. How much credence are you putting in that?
It wouldn't surprise me if there's interest. I mean, I really think, especially the way he slotted in to the international team with Belgium, the way he performed in Old Firm games, the way he performed in Europe. I mean, it was at Philippe Clement last week. I think in an interview said that he felt he was Premier League ready. I'm not entirely sure that I would say he's starting an Aston Villa team. I think he was certainly worth a punt for them. And I think I wrote a piece. I think Scott McDermott wrote a piece as well recently, sort of questioning whether or not the sort of transfer values that have been bandied about would be accurate, or Rangers would get the kind of sums that they would wish for. I think Raskin has been a terrific player. I think he's get better and better this season, but I still think there are times when he doesn't grip a game in the way that Rangers would hope for. I mean, as much as he was great in Old Firm games, as much as he was terrific against Fenerbahce in Europe, I was at Dens Park, I was at St Mirren when he got overrun at times by those sides in the middle of the pitch. So I think there's aspects to his game that definitely he needs to improve on, but there's potential there, and that's what Rangers are buying these days. They can't buy the finished article. They're having to buy guys that get things that can be worked on, that can be polished up, and hope that they do that and turn a profit. Whether or not that gets them sums worth of £20 million, I'm still not convinced. But I think Rangers, especially under this new regime, they can't sit on assets like they have in previous years, your Moreloses, your Kents, and see that money then flitter out the window when they knock back bids and the follow-ups don't come. A decent enough bid, if anything north of 15, 16 million quid comes in for Nico Raskin, they should be taking it, given they spent £2.5 million, I think it was, to get him here from Standard Liège a couple of years ago. Taking that and backing themselves to go and find somebody equally as good for a fraction of the price. That's what Celtic do. That's how Celtic have managed to, build up this huge sort of war chest that they've got, allied with the Champions League money. But this is what Celtic do. Rangers need to basically get themselves into a position where they're doing the same.
You can see in the comments there, Carter says you get about 4 million max. However, Rangers fans, Dennis says minimum 20 million. Engels is worth 11 million and not in the Belgian squad. Raskin's a regular. Going by those facts, he's worth a hell of a lot more than Engels. Mark also says even a Celtic fan should admit Raskin is worth 20 million plus. I don't know about you, Keith. I kind of agree with Andy. I think 20 million's a wee bit high.
Yeah. Do you know what? Let's say on a house, you'll get what somebody's prepared to pay you. I think if Aston Villa, and this is why I want to ask Andy, I think if there is a Villa interest, I can completely understand it. You've got Yuri Tielemans playing as a regular in that Villa midfield. If he's got Unai Emery's ear and he's telling him, this boy's a player, and you can see the two of them dovetailing in there, John McGinn, guys like that around about. I think Raskin, I don't think there's a glass ceiling with Raskin. I genuinely think he's a really talented boy. I'm not sure that you would be looking at figures quite like that at this minute in time for him. What I would say is, if Rangers could extend his contract and keep him for another year, maybe extend it by a couple of years and keep him another year, and if he was to go to the World Cup with Belgium and be a regular in that midfield, I think once you get to that stage, if he's really established himself and is performing on the highest stage of all for a Belgian midfield, I think that does come with a premium price tag attached. And I think at that point, you might be looking, as opposed to selling now for 10 or 12, maybe even less than that. I think if you extended his contract to future-proof yourself on it, and you trust his development to go to that next level with Belgium, and to have a big season domestically, I think then you could be looking at really big bucks for Nico Raskin. And that's all the question of timing, isn't it? And Celtic have become so expert at it over the years. Andy says he's quite right to refer to Celtic's model, but it's not just that Celtic take any offer at any point. They do the calculations on it and they work out, we'll get maximum value for this guy at that time. And I wonder if, rather than Rangers just being in a position where, because their model hasn't been working for so long, that they just take what they can get when they can get it. I always thought with Nathan Patterson, for example, Rangers made a mistake there. Nathan Patterson's career hasn't worked out ever in the way that I was expecting it would do, and I think a lot of that's down to Sean Dyche. But Rangers sold there at £12 million when he was just about, he was first team ready, and Tavernier was coming off the back of a season when he was top scorer in a European competition from right back. For me, Celtic at that point sell Tavernier and promote Patterson and give Patterson 2-3 seasons, much like they did when Kieran Tierney took over from Izagiri at left back. Right. I think that's the way a model works, because you look to optimise what you can bring in rather than just sell when you get pound signs thrown in your eyes. I think Rangers were guilty of that. I think that was poor management. I'm trying to think who was in charge as director of football back then.
It would have been Ross Wilson.
It was Ross Wilson. And that's got a very Ross Wilson feel to it. I think that's a model that's not working. When you're selling your potential and keeping a guy and allowing him to get to the stage that Tavernier, what would they have got back then? I don't know. Not mega money, but really significant. And they would have made such a profit on him, having had him for years of service, at a point when Nathan Patterson was ready to step in and become a regular first-team player. And I think...
So, Keith, it is fascinating to see how this new regime are going to handle these questions that you're raising, because you're right where you were, even when you were discussing earlier on, it's hard not to judge Rangers by past deeds, but this is a new Rangers regime, from top to bottom, effectively. So, they're going to do things their own way. We can only, as you say, judge them by what's come before, but as you rightly say, that's not fair in them. They're going to make their own steps. So it's going to be really interesting to see when the first time a big bid does come in for one of the guys, whether they just go, right, we want the money and we're going to back ourselves, or if they're going to hold out, go, no, we believe that Nico Raskin is worth £20 million, we're going to dig our heels in. It's going to be
or can get there, or can grow into that. And I think it's interesting, Andy, when you look at the decision on Dessers that we think is going to go to AEK Athens for £5 million there or thereabouts. That to me is a similar situation to Tavernier, where you've got a guy who's now the wrong side of 30. He's only going to become a depreciating asset from this point onwards. His value is just going to drop. And I think Rangers have done quite well there. I think if there's a Rangers fan out there, you'd be looking at that, you'd be fairly encouraged with that bit of business. If they can get that money in, and people will look and say, and quite rightly so, that Dessers has made quite a big contribution in terms of his goals over the last couple of seasons. Of course he has. But that's the way to work your business model. If you can sell on and make a profit at that age on a guy who, you've got to imagine needs to be starting. You wouldn't, as a Rangers supporters, I'm sure, wouldn't want to think that next season Cyril Dessers would have been their main choice at number 9 again. So you'd be looking to phase him out, perhaps the way that I was talking about Tavernier those years ago. You think, right, do you know what? You've achieved everything that you can achieve here in terms of putting on value. Now you move, and this guy moves in. Celtic did it with Tierney, and as give him a couple of seasons in first-team football, and then sold him for 25. And Rangers grabbed £12 million for Patterson.
Yeah, they did the same with Alistair Johnson and Juranovic before. It's that, take the money when it's there, as long as it's the right offer, but back yourself to go and find the replacement and have one ready to go once the money hits the bank account. And that's what Rangers need to be thinking with Dessers, whether it be Turgeman or any other sort of guys that they've been linked with. But as soon as that money drops for Dessers, they need to be ready to go and be sure that they've got a guy that can fill and can replace the goals that Dessers provides.
We need to go across the city, guys, because time is getting on. And Mikey asks, are Celtic going to sign a striker to replace Kyogo? And just to dovetail with that, this one here from Craig, he says, Evan Ferguson would absolutely flourish at Celtic. He'd bang goals in for fun, a massive upgrade on Adam Ida. It's a name that kind of hasn't gone away this summer, Keith, Evan Ferguson to Celtic. I know he's at Brighton. He was once heralded as...
I was going to say, Evan Ferguson of, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, would have been, you would look at him as a massive upgrade on Adam Ida. I'm not sure that rule can still be applied. Is Adam Ida not keeping him out of Ireland's starting 11? I'm not sure that it is, actually. What I would say is that Evan Ferguson looked every inch a superstar when he was breaking through at Brighton. It was sensational. And I think at that point, comparisons were even being made to Harry Kane. Mm-hmm. In terms of his physicality, his range of finishing, his speed, his aggression, his ability to deal with defenders. I thought the boy looked at absolute full package. And I just thought this boy was destined for huge things. And I was actually pretty upset about it, because at that minute in time, obviously, Scotland, we were crying out for a striker coming through and getting us excited, a potential match winner. And I thought Republic of Ireland have found themselves an absolute gem here. I don't know what's happened to his career, because, I mean, it hasn't just kind of slowed, it shuddered to a halt, hasn't it? I know that there was interest, or certainly speculated interest from Celtic midway through last season. Was it even the season before? And he went to West Ham instead. And at that point, you could understand that, because I think he'd only had maybe a poor few months, but that poor few months has now developed into a poor year.
I think is it 3 goals in 18 months? I think he scored.
Yeah, you're right. Two for Ireland.
And given the standard that he set for himself when he burst onto the scene, I find that astonishing and alarming a little bit. If I was looking at making a big investment, and I'm sure that's why he probably finds himself in this position. That all said, one of the key Celtic strategies certainly in Martin O'Neill's time was, if you can go and pick yourself a player that has got proven ability, but might be having a difficult period in his career. I'm looking at your Chris Suttons, for example. They can reinvent themselves in Scottish football. And you would look at everything that you ever saw from Evan Ferguson and think, if he was fit, motivated, and had the fire in his belly, you're right, he would be an absolute sensation up here. But, what's his value? Are there English Premier League clubs who look at him and think, well, we can throw him a lifeline? Because if they do believe that, they'll be able to counterpunch in terms of what they can offer contractually, in terms of a wage packet for the boy. But he's got a big decision to make, because his career is not going the way many of us imagined, almost all of us, I think, imagined it would just a couple of years ago.
I suppose Adam Ida's the perfect example, because where was he going at Norwich before he came up here? Was he third choice down at Carroll Road? Really going nowhere, comes up, has a terrific 6 months, wins his move here. Norwich dig their heels in for a pretty sizable fee for him. Okay, he's not probably hit the heights that Brendan Rodgers was looking for, but I think he still got 19 goals last season. I mean, he's still more than played his part in a Celtic's double success. So, I think the Sutton example was the one I was going to reach for, Keith. I think you looked at him at Chelsea. I think it was at 3 goals down at Stamford Bridge back in whatever it was, 2000. Looked like his career was sort of, just sort of fading out, because Michael Keane was a revelation. So, as I say, Evan Ferguson sort of he's struggling in the Premier League. Adam Ida was struggling in the Championship, and he's come up here and played a decent level. So if Evan Ferguson can get himself going in the Premiership, I would back him to be a very good signing for Celtic. I think he's he showed in that initial purple patch just how dangerous a striker he can be if he can just get that opportunity, just to find his confidence. That's the way it is a lot of times with strikers. They just, once they get themselves into that zone, off they go, and it's hard to stop them.
Yeah, I think at that time he one of these guys that you could actually feel himself visualising scoring a goal when he was walking onto a pitch, as if he was going to manifest it. And he knew that he was going to score goals. Ball came to him, he knew he was going to score it. Didn't think about it, didn't overthink it. It was all just so natural to him at that point. He was phenomenal. And that's why he got the kind of comparisons with Harry Kane. And I don't think that was over the top at the time, because he was going goal for goal with Harry Kane in the Premier League at that point in his career. And looking like a younger, stronger, faster version.
I think, Keith, that Evan Ferguson on loan to Celtic for the season makes sense to me. And I think he would absolutely fly up here under Brendan Rodgers.
Well, yeah, listen, I don't disagree with you, but again, as we were talking about there with Bournemouth and Max Aaron, these clubs aren't in the business of doing favours for people. There would need to be a reason for Brighton to loan him out. I think he's still got a few years left in his contract. And if there is a manager down there that is looking at him thinking he can get a turn out of him and make him a Premier League player, then Brighton can get a fee. And it's similar with what Bournemouth might be looking to do with Max Aaron right now, in terms of why would I put him out on loan if I think I could get 8, 9, 10 million quid? Mm-hmm. And that's for a right back, maybe 7 million pound for a right back. So what's a striker? What's a striker that showed the potential and has proven what he can do in the English Premier League? What kind of price does that carry? So if it gets to the end of the window and nobody's taking a punt on it, then that's when I think Celtic becomes a realistic possibility.
Away from Celtic and Rangers, Hearts steadily motoring along with their signings. A photo's been doing the rounds on social media today showing what appears to be Stuart Findlay inside Tynecastle holding up the maroon jersey. Nothing confirmed yet, but he would definitely be a really good signing, Andy, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, Derek McInnes will know him very well from obviously their time together at Rugby Park. 29, he's still a good age. You know, just a solid Premiership centre back, isn't he? I can just imagine that. You know, Derek McInnes, when he's going into a new club, I think you see this a lot with managers. They want to have a familiar face in there, just somebody that they know that they can rely on, just to ease themselves into this new surroundings. So I can imagine Derek McInnes will just be thinking, Stuart Findlay, somebody that I've been with for a couple of years now. I know I can trust him. He's been around the block in Scotland for a very long time. You know, maybe not many frills about him, but just a solid, dependable centre back. So I can see it as being a fairly decent. I know risks, you know, signing you're going in there, you know, as a free, I presume. So it's not one that comes with many risks attached to it.
Are we saying that Jamestown Analytics didn't identify this signing?
Surely not.
That's an interesting element to the whole Derek McInnes thing, isn't it? That how much would he allow himself to be dictated to by the data and the algorithms, and how much, rather than being head coach, and he was announced as well by Hearts as head coach. But
I remember speaking to him when he was at Kelly, and especially when he first went in there, and he had to do all the recruitment side himself, and just given how competitive recruitment is these days compared to maybe when he was starting out at St Johnstone, he found it really taxing. And so I think he'll be delighted to get any help he can get. I knew that I remember speaking to him, and he just found it such a draining experience having to spend hour after hour scouring tapes and speaking to agents and doing all that sort of the behind the scenes stuff when it comes to signing players themselves. So I can imagine that you'll be delighted to have somebody cutting out all the donkey work on it.
I think he'll be very open to it, Andy. But I don't think he'll be a slave to it or be dictated to by it. And you know,
it's a helping hand, isn't it? It's not the be all and end all. It's just something there to give you.
It's a help. It's a guide. Yeah. No. And I don't think you need a boffin in a lab to tell Derek McInnes what Stuart Findlay might be able to bring to his defence. So yeah, that's interesting, and that'll be interesting to see going forward. Again, it could be just a perfect mix where Derek McInnes can identify what he knows and trusts and needs in players, and then the algorithms might come up with guys that he wouldn't have thought of before. But I think that he will have more of a final say in terms of, that discussion we were having earlier. I think Derek McInnes will be central to everything that Hearts do in terms of recruitment. I don't think he'll be told, you're getting this one, that one, and that one. I think that he'll very much have, if not the final say, then, well, yeah, he will have the final say, I would have thought.
And Rebel says in the comments, he'll have more time to top up his talent. Win-win. Just very finally, guys, European draws back tomorrow. Scottish teams will find out their fate. I know we've talked about Rangers, but 3 teams Rangers can face, Andy, in their, I think it's the second qualifying round draw for the Champions League. Servette, who they've played before, obviously. Bran, who beat St Mirren last year. But Panathinaikos, that's the big one that I imagine they don't want to get.
Yeah, just with the heat over there, I think you'll be, even at kick-off, I imagine Greece, Athens in height of summer, middle of July, you'll be thinking about temperatures sort of north of 30 degrees, 35 degrees almost, maybe around about kick-off time. So I can imagine that'd be the last one they'd want, just given, as I say, those conditions. But I spoke to 3 journalists from each of the 3 clubs that have been covering each of the 3 clubs this morning for a piece that's on the website as well. And I must admit, all 3 of them fancy their own teams to get through. I mean, I think it was even one of the colleagues I spoke to from Norway who felt the way they were viewing it was that Rangers would be the easiest of the 3 teams that they could get can't remember who the other two seeds are. I think maybe thinking Red Bull Salzburg are one of them, I think. So I can imagine these three teams are all looking at this game as an opportunity for them to get through, and it comes with some jeopardy for Rangers. If they were to lose in this second qualifying round, then they would not be guaranteed to get into a group stage. They would have to win, at least one of the two remaining ties after that. So I can imagine. Listen, as I was saying earlier on, it's a huge task this for Russell Martin. Whatever the club want to achieve this season domestically, Europe might be an inconvenience they could do without, but what they can't do without is the money it provides. We see last year Rangers making the quarterfinals of the Europa League. It makes them £20 million, but that's still £20 million behind what Celtic got for getting through to the last 16 in the Champions League. So the playoff round of the Champions League. So this is, for what Rangers want to achieve, they have to get themselves through at the very least into Europa League. But I would imagine they've got real ambitions of taking on Celtic this season and getting into the Champions League itself would go a long way to sort of helping them.
Aye. Mark points out they've got 3 qualifying rounds to get through if they want to make the group stages. And Keith, I know I'm stating the obvious here, but we want to see several Scottish teams in the group stage of European football.
Listen, it's boom time for us in Scottish football. The more teams that we can get into the group stages, and that's what's encouraging about the creation, the third tier competition in Europe. It opens up more spaces, more avenues, more access and routes into European football. That's where all the money is, and that's why there are people looking at Scottish clubs now, and American influence coming into Scottish football, because they know you don't need to reinvent the wheel in terms of making Hearts or Hibs or whoever champions of Scotland to get access to European revenue. You just need to make sure they're up that end, they're competing. And if you can get into group stage football and European football, that's where you unlock the money that people complain we don't make enough, and we don't from our own domestic TV revenue. That's where the money is. And if you can consistently compete in European football, it's all good in terms of money coming back in, washing through the Scottish game and helping the standards improve. So we need it. Dream scenario would be Rangers somehow get through these qualifiers and get into the Champions League. I think, given where they are right now, that looks unlikely. Celtic, you would like to think, have got a real opportunity of getting group stage in the Champions League. Rangers have looked over the last period fairly comfortable on Thursday nights in the Europa League. You would hope that might continue. And then you're looking below and saying, look, guys, can you imagine we get 2 clubs into the Europa League? Can you imagine we get another one? You start filling up all the boxes and getting as many teams in. That's the dream ticket for Scottish football. All too often, the clubs that kind of celebrate winning a place to compete in the early qualifying stages for Europe, they kind of fall flat on their faces. It'd be nice if we could just get more clubs, going in at that level, punching their weight, getting group stage European football, and just injecting that fresh revenue and energy and optimism into the Scottish game.
And just before we finish, our old pal Gianni seems to be suggesting that you and I, Andy, we're in Zante for a week.
It's a back garden tan. I've still got another 5 weeks before my hot summer holidays, counting every minute. No.
I'd like to pour cold water in Gianni's latest assertion there before we finish. And on the European draws, we'll be back tomorrow to look over them all on the Hotline Live. We'll be back at 6 p.m. Thank you so much for all of your comments tonight. We really appreciate it. If you want to join us, as I say, we'll be back to do it all again tomorrow. Andy, Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Let's just see what Glasgow City Council have in store for us tomorrow and the big journey back into the studio, Daniel. Whether or not I'll be here or not.
Aye. Well, fingers crossed. Time will tell. Thanks very much for watching at home. Cheers.